Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, last night, President Obama stated that airstrikes are a key pillar in the fight against ISIS. In the last week, we've seen the Obama administration, Germany, France, and the UK step up their efforts and their airstrikes. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has ordered our CF-18s to stand down. Why is the Prime Minister stepping back from the fight when our allies are stepping up?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada has spoken clearly in this past election. They want Canadians and our military to continue to engage in the fight against ISIS, and we are committed to continuing to do that. However, we have also made a clear commitment to withdraw the 6 CF-18 fighter jets and engage in a continued way militarily, in humanitarian efforts and in refugee efforts, which we are continuing to do. I engage with our allies on these issues, and they've reassured me that we are continuing to be helpful. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Let's just be clear about what ISIS is. They are a death cult that sell children and women into sexual slavery. They target and kill gays and lesbians, and they have murdered thousands of Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities. Yet the Prime Minister says he's going to take our CF-18s out of the fight. Just how bad does it have to be in Iraq and Syria for him to leave our CF-18s there?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there isn't a Canadian in this country who doesn't think that ISIS are a group of terrible terrorists who should be stopped. The question has always been how best to engage. How can Canada use its strengths, the extraordinary strengths of the men and women of the Canadian forces, to support in the fight against ISIS? Now, ongoing right now continue to be airstrikes. We have committed to end those airstrikes and to transform our engagement in a different way, equally militarily, to ensure that Canada continues to be a strong member of the coalition fighting against ISIS.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, last night President Obama also said that his closest allies have stepped up their airstrikes. And then he went on to name France and Germany and the UK. But no mention of Canada. Mr. Speaker, stepping back from the fight against terrorists is not stepping up. So will the Prime Minister just admit that he's more committed to his ideology than he is to our allies in the fight against ISIS?
Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Just a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, I sat down with President Obama and discussed and confirmed that Canada continues to be a strong supporter of the coalition against ISIL and continues to be engaged on a humanitarian level, on a refugee level, and indeed on a military level. And right now we are in discussions with our allies about how best Canada can continue to participate and to help in the fight against ISIL since we are withdrawing our CF-18 aircraft.
Honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président, hier soir, Monsieur le Président Obama a eu des mots très durs envers l'État islamique. Laissez-moi vous le citer. La menace du terrorisme est réelle, mais nous la vaincrons. Nous détruirons l'État islamique et toute autre organisation qui chercherait à nous nuire. Monsieur le Président, est-ce que le Premier ministre peut nous assurer qu'il partage la même vision, Monsieur le Président Obama?
Très honorable Premier ministre.
Évidemment, Monsieur le Président, le Canada, moi-même, le Parti libéral, le gouvernement du Canada continue à être résolu dans notre désir et notre conviction de continuer ce combat international parmi la coalition contre l'État islamique. Mais ce que nous n'allons pas faire, c'est continuer d'essayer d'en parler, de donner de la publicité gratuite à l'État islamique, parce qu'eux, on sait qu'ils utilisent la propagande pour se propager, pour s'élever.
Honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
Bien sûr, Monsieur Président, Monsieur le Premier ministre vient de faire référence à sa rencontre avec M. Obama. Très particulier que quelques jours après, en parlant de ses fidèles alliés, il parle de l'Allemagne, de la France, du Royaume-Uni.
Mais pas du Canada.
On a beau avoir des beaux slogans. Canada is backtracking son support pour nos alliés. Comment, Monsieur le Premier ministre, va-t-il, lui, défendre les Canadiens contre l'État islamique?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Comme j'ai toujours dit, Monsieur le Président, le Canada demeure résolu dans le combat contre l'État islamique. Nous allons continuer de rester engagés de façon militaire, mais nous allons retirer nos avions de chasse parce que, carrément, ça fait des mois et des mois qu'on en parle aux Canadiens et les Canadiens nous font confiance pour continuer à être forts contre l'État islamique d'une façon qui est appropriée pour le Canada. Merci.
Honorable député de Outremont.
Monsieur le Président, je veux commencer en félicitant le Premier ministre et en lui assurant que le NPD sera une opposition qui a l'intention d'aider le gouvernement à mettre en œuvre les changements promis aux Canadiens. Par contre, plusieurs Canadiens sont déçus que le Premier ministre a amené dans sa valise pour Paris le plan, les cibles et l'échéancier de l'ancien gouvernement conservateur en matière de gaz à effet de serre. Le Premier ministre peut-il s'engager ici, aujourd'hui, qu'en 2016, les émissions de gaz à effet de serre du Canada vont diminuer, oui ou non?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Monsieur le Président, je félicite l'élection de mon honorable adversaire. La réalité, c'est que nous avons amené un nouveau plan à Paris. Pendant la campagne électorale, nous nous sommes engagés sur des dizaines de milliards de nouveaux investissements en infrastructures vertes, en innovation, en énergie verte, en énergie propre. Nous avons tout un plan pour atteindre ce que ce gouvernement précédent n'a pas pu, c'est-à-dire de réduire nos émissions.
Honorable député d'Outremont.
Donc, aucun plan pour réduire nos GES l'année prochaine. Canadians are proud to see a change in tone on climate change, but they're also hoping that the change of tone will bring about a concrete change of direction. Once it finally decides on Canada's targets, will this government make them binding by enshrining them into a climate change accountability law here at home?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
One of the things that my honourable colleague seems to forget from time to time is Canada is a federation with 10 provinces that all have different approaches and different requirements. So we have committed to sit down and engage with those provinces, listen to them, and work out not just targets but a plan that is going to ensure that Canada meets its international and domestic obligations to reduce climate emissions and develop a strong economy.
Honourable member for Outremont.
I thought he just said he had a plan. During the campaign, the Liberal leader said he would, quote, restore robust oversight and thorough environmental assessments. But last week, the Environment Minister said that projects initiated under the Conservative system will, quote, continue on that path. Can the Prime Minister reveal whether pipelines, for example, now under review, will undergo a thorough assessment that includes greenhouse gas impacts? Or will they simply continue to use the woefully inadequate assessment system left by the Conservatives?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It's very clear, Mr. Speaker, that Canadians know that we need both a strong environment and a protected, strong economy and a strong environment at the same time. That's why Canadians want a system environmental assessment that they can trust. We will launch a public review and we will make the changes needed to restore public confidence in the environmental assessment of natural resource projects. We will modernize the National Energy Board to ensure that its composition reflects regional views and has sufficient expertise in environmental science, community development, and Indigenous traditional knowledge.
Honorable député d'Outremont.
Donc, les projets d'oléoduc vont continuer en vertu du système des conservateurs. Pendant la campagne électorale, le premier ministre a dit au sujet de Post-Canada, et je cite, « Nous nous engageons à restaurer le service à domicile », fin de la citation. Pourtant, rien dans le discours du trône et sa ministre des Services publics a dit la semaine dernière que le service ne serait pas rétabli. Alors, qui dit vrai? Est-ce que le premier ministre va respecter?
Très honorable Premier ministre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La réalité, c'est que nous nous sommes engagés clairement à offrir aux Canadiens les services dont qui s'attendent de Post Canada. Nous allons travailler avec Post Canada. Nous avons imposé un moratoire sur l'arrêt des installations des bureaux, boîtes de postales et nous allons continuer de travailler avec les ministres et avec les partenaires pour s'assurer que les Canadiens ont les services dont ils ont besoin.
The honourable member for Milton.
I'd like to begin, first of all, Mr. Speaker, by welcoming the honourable member, the Minister of Finance, to the House. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun in the coming weeks. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made two fundamental commitments to Canadians. One, that the deficit wouldn't go above $10 billion per year, and two, that any tax increases would actually be revenue neutral. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, neither of these are true, and it seems as if we're leaving these commitments in the dust. So my question for the Minister of Finance is, how much will these broken promises cost Canadians?
Good question. The honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question. It's a pleasure to be here and a privilege. We made commitments to Canadians during the course of our campaign. We recognize that the economy is slowing. It's slower than we expected. We are going to make significant investments in our economy through infrastructure investments. We are going to make sure that we reduce our net debt to GDP over the course of our mandate, and we intend on getting to a balanced budget during the term of our mandate. We look forward to serving Canadians in this way. Thank you.
The honourable member for Milton.
Speaker, we are going to hold the minister to his promise to Canadians of balancing budget by 2013. But one way of balancing that budget, Mr. Speaker, is by increasing taxes. And indeed, this government already says they're going to increase taxes, but guess what? It's not going to pay for what is happening on the other end of the balance. There's no revenue neutrality here. So my question for the minister is this. Will now he admit, now that he's going to admit later on today supposedly, that indeed that this isn't going to work for him, will he admit that increased payroll taxes, that increased taxes on retirement savings, and the complex re-engineering of how children receive their support is not going to work either and is also flawed?
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, again, I'd like to thank the honourable member and say I think that this will be fun. I will say that we're starting today with a very important part of our plan. We are starting today with middle-class tax breaks, a key part of our initiative to help communities.
Honourable member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, one thing is for sure, this government is very good at giving out money, but are they good at growing the economy? Mr. Speaker, oil today is at $38 a barrel. We are understanding that 185,000 job losses in the oil and gas sector in 2006 are possible. This affects everybody who works in that sector, including those in Alberta. Albertans are hurting, Mr. Speaker, yet this sector was not mentioned even once in the speech from the throne. Why is Canada's economic engine not a priority for this government?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we have inherited a situation that is more challenging than was foreseen in the budget. We are looking forward to making significant investments in our economy to help the growth of the economy because we recognize the challenges that Canadians are facing across this country. We look forward to doing a better job for Canadians in the years to come.
Honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, Président, lors de la campagne électorale, le premier ministre a pris, entre autres, 2 engagements majeurs. Tout d'abord, pas de déficit de plus de 10 milliards de dollars. Et également, s'il y avait des changements au type d'imposition, ça allait profiter à tous les Canadiens. Malheureusement, les Canadiens se réveillent aujourd'hui avec la réalité. Ça ne tiendra pas. Ces promesses sont irréalisables et irréalistes. Monsieur le Président, est-ce que le premier ministre peut se lever et dire aux Canadiens directement, ça va leur coûter combien, ces promesses brisées?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we aspire to be transparent and open with Canadians. Our goal is to give Canadians a clear understanding of the fiscal situation from which we can make investments that will make a real long-term difference for Canadians. And that's exactly what we intend on doing by bringing forward our plan over the course of our budget that will show Canadians how we can improve our collective future.
Honorable député de Louis-Saint-Laurent.
Monsieur le Président, parmi les grands oubliés au discours du trône vendredi dernier, nos créateurs de richesse, les entrepreneurs. Pas un mot, pas de plan concret pour aider nos entrepreneurs, pour aider nos petites et moyennes entreprises ou pour aider nos entreprises manufacturières. Monsieur le Président, ici, de ce côté-ci de la Chambre, on estime que les vrais créateurs de richesse, ce sont nos entrepreneurs. Pourquoi le gouvernement a négligé nos créateurs d'emplois? Pourquoi le gouvernement a réagi nos créateurs de richesse? Pourquoi le gouvernement néglige les entrepreneurs canadiens?
L'honorable ministre des Finances.
Monsieur le Président, je veux dire merci à l'honorable député. We have recognized that we need to deal with all Canadians. Our goal is to help entrepreneurs, to help businesses across the country by setting forward a plan that will allow us to invest in our country so that we can make our country more productive and increase growth going forward while helping those that are struggling to get by, which is exactly what we're starting with today.
The Honourable Member for Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, Liberals are already increasing payroll taxes, clawing back tax-free savings accounts, and implementing a job-killing carbon tax. They're also planning to get rid of boutique tax credits without any details of who will be affected. Can the Finance Minister tell us whether he plans to eliminate tax credits for first-time homebuyers, students, apprentices, families with children in the sports and arts, or all of the above?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we can tell the House today is that we are starting our program to help Canadians. Today is a day where we have said we are going to reduce middle-class taxes by asking those Canadians who are doing very well to pay a little bit more. This is an important first start in our tax program, a program that will make Canada a fairer place for Canadians and a better place for all of us to do business.
Hear, hear. Honorable député de Rimouski-Neigette, Témiscouata-les-Basques.
Merci. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government is now admitting their tax plan doesn't add up. They will have to make changes. The new government's plan gives maximum benefit to wealthy Canadians while giving nothing to nearly 70%. The NDP has proposed constructive change to ensure benefits go to 90% of Canadians. Will the minister work with us to help millions more by fixing the government's plan and making the tax system more fair?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I want to first thank the Honourable Deputy for his question and say congratulations on his election. I will say that our plan, when looked at in totality over the coming months, will show that 9 out of 10 Canadian families will be better off through the course of our mandate, through our projections, because of our changes. We will also raise 315,000 Canadian children out of poverty. So our plan will start by reducing taxes and move forward to help Canadians across this country from coast to coast to coast.
Honorable député de Rimouski-Neigette, Témiscouata-les-Basques.
Monsieur le Président, cela étant, sous le plan fiscal des libéraux, la personne gagnant un revenu médian ne reçoit rien. Par contre, ceux et celles gagnant entre 89 000 et 200 000 recevront le maximum de la réduction d'impôt. Est-ce que le ministre croit qu'une personne qui gagne le revenu médian ne fait pas partie de la classe moyenne ou accepterait-il de travailler avec le NPD afin de s'assurer que 90 % de la population en retire quelque chose? Bravo.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we are looking forward to working together with all of our colleagues in this House in trying to come up with policy that best helps Canadians move forward. Our plans that we've enumerated during our campaign will help 9 out of 10 families to be better off. It will raise 315,000 children out of poverty. We know that we can start with a tax cut for Canadians in the middle class so they will have more money to help our economy, and we can move forward with other initiatives that will help other Canadians even more.
Honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals have admitted that their campaign promise to bring 25,000 Syrian refugees to Canada by year's end was not within their ability to achieve. The government of Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan require exit permits to be issued to refugees before they can come to Canada. Given that there are only 24 days left for the Liberals to meet their diminished refugee target, can the Minister of Immigration tell the House exactly how many exit permits have actually been issued to by these governments for refugees coming to Canada since November the 4th?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate my colleague for her re-election and her rise to the noble post of immigration critic in the opposition. And I would simply say that we have pursued a totally open communication policy with Canadians from the beginning. From the beginning, we have said that, yes, there are issues surrounding exit permits from Lebanon. We have also dealing with Jordan and with Turkey, and we are working extremely hard on the ground to secure those exit permits so we can...
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, given my colleagues' focus on talking about rising to the occasion, I would say that sunny ways have actually met reality here. So, Mr. Speaker, given that there are only 24 days left before the end of the year, how many, can the Minister of Immigration please inform the House, since he wasn't able to answer that question on exit permits, how many Syrian refugees have been identified for resettlement to Canada, the exact number, and how many Canadian permanent residence visas have actually been issued to Syrian refugees since November the 4th? There's only 24 days left, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to answer that question, because when I asked every provincial immigration minister how many refugees from Syria his province could receive, do you know what? We were oversubscribed. If you take all the numbers presented by every provincial minister, that number exceeds 25,000. Those people are not here yet, but it's a huge indication of early support and enthusiasm from our provincial governments, which spreads across the whole country, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Markham-Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, even the Liberals' diminished refugee target will require significant resources to achieve. We still need to process application in other immigration streams, including refugee claims from other parts of the world, spousal applications, and visitors visas. Can the Minister explain how diverting human resources to process Syrian refugee applications will impact other areas of our immigration system?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I asked my department this question, and I was a little bit skeptical when I was told it would have no impact on refugees from other countries, but I persisted, and they explained to me that while some resources are being diverted to the Syrian cause, no resources are being diverted for other refugees. So I can say very clearly, other refugees will not be affected by the Syrian case.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is vital that our government provide assistance
to Syrian refugees, but security on the ground is key to provide aid to those vulnerable people. Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government understood this importance of both engaging ISIL militarily and providing aid. But the new government has decided to sit on the sidelines on one flank, making it even more dangerous for the people still in the camps. Mr. Speaker, will the Minister of International Development explain the logic of helping the victims of war while not engaging the aggressor?
Honourable Minister of International Development.
Monsieur le Président, la semaine dernière, on a informé qu'on allait ajouter une contribution financière de 100 millions de dollars pour aider l'aide humanitaire sur le terrain, pour aider d'une part le Haut Commissariat aux réfugiés à pouvoir préparer un plus grand nombre de réfugiés et un 90 millions de dollars qui est dédié à aider les gens vraiment dans les camps, les réfugiés qui sont actuellement dans les pays limitrophes.
La députée de Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik, EU.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dans son discours du trône, le gouvernement a réitéré sa volonté d'établir une relation de nation à nation avec les peuples autochtones. Monsieur le Président, nous saluons cet engagement et offrons notre entière collaboration. Après des décennies de promesses brisées, cette fois-ci, Monsieur le Président, doit être la bonne. Mais on attend toujours les détails pour les 2,6 milliards promis en campagne pour l'éducation des Premières Nations. Alors, est-ce que la ministre peut nous dire quand son gouvernement fera-t-il connaître ses intentions?
Honourable Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Abitibi, James Bay, EU, and I thank him for all of the work that he has done on this issue, and particularly on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You have taught us a lot, member, and so he has. I look forward. This government has committed to a nation-to-nation relationship, and we will begin that very important work of reconciliation, and we will need the help of all members in the House.
Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I'm heartened by the minister's language on reconciliation, but she does know, as we do, the reconciliation has to begin on the ground in communities like Shoal Lake, Martin Falls, and Neskantanga, where children are facing bacterial infections from dirty water. And we all have a responsibility to change that. So the Prime Minister has committed 5 years to ending the boiled water advisory. So I'm asking the Minister, could she tell us what her timeline is for an action plan, and will that action plan have clear guidelines and commitments so we can get results for these communities?
Honourable Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Member from Timmins, James Bay, for all of his hard work, and not only in his community, but for First Nations coast to coast to coast. As our government has committed to a nation-to-nation approach, it means that we will have to work with First Nations, Inuit and Métis Nation for us to be able to achieve this goal, and I look forward to working with the member to make sure that happens, and then we will have realistic timelines and goals and the budget assigned.
Bravo.
L'honorable député d'Ottawa-Vanier.
Monsieur le Président, lors du 41e Parlement, j'ai à 3 reprises posé des questions. Pourquoi le gouvernement de l'époque déportait encore les citoyens du Burundi? Je suis très fier de notre gouvernement d'arrêter la semaine dernière ces déportations. Le ministre de la Sécurité publique pourrait-il nous dire ce que le Canada entend faire pour stabiliser le Burundi.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to have my first question in this portfolio from that distinguished member. When people need to be removed from Canada according to the law, one of the factors taken into consideration is whether that can be done safely. The most recent information available to us on the country of Burundi indicates that removals cannot be done safely at the present time. Consequently, the Government of Canada immediately has announced that the Canada Border Services Agency has imposed an administrative deferral on all removals from Canada to Burundi.
The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, in the speech from the throne, the Liberal government told Canadians they want a leaner military. And we all know leaner is just a code word for cuts. Last spring, the Parliamentary Budget Officer acknowledged in his report on national defence spending, and I quote, "The most significant cuts occurred from 1995 to 2004. Mr. Speaker, that was under the previous Liberal government. Are we going back to the future? Can the Minister of Defence tell us what he's going to be cutting?
The Honourable Minister of Defence.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I just want to say it's a privilege and an honour to be standing for the first time in this honourable House. Our government is committed to the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. We will be making sure that the planned increases remain in place and making sure that when we send our men and women to the important missions around the world, that they actually have the capabilities to achieve that mission. Thank you.
The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, the throne speech was 1,700 words, and not one of those words was ISIS. In the past few days, we have watched with leaders of France, the United Kingdom, and the United States announce that they're stepping up in the fight against ISIS. Back here, the Liberal government is stepping back. Canada's back, all right, way back behind our allies in the fight against ISIS. Why won't the Prime Minister stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies in the fight against ISIS?
Honourable Ministre des Affaires globales.
Speaker, the honourable member expressed the view of his party, and our view is that we will be more optimally effective with our allies to fight this awful terrorist group if we stop to deliver only 2% of the airstrikes and if we focus on where Canada will make a real difference.
L'honorable député de Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles.
Monsieur le Président, j'étais lieutenant-colonel dans les Forces armées canadiennes. J'ai subi les compressions budgétaires des libéraux à l'époque. Dans son discours du trône, vendredi, le gouvernement libéral a mentionné qu'il allait rationaliser nos capacités de défense actuelles. Est-ce que le ministre peut nous dire, au lieu de parler de recherche d'efficience, spécifiquement quelle division des Forces armées canadiennes subiront des compressions budgétaires, Monsieur le Président?
Bravo! The Honourable Minister of Defence.
Mr. Speaker, this government is committing to making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces has the right capabilities. We want to make sure that every department needs to strive for efficiency, and our government plans to do so, to making sure that we have the right resources at the pointy end where our men and women need it the most. Thank you.
Honorable député de Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles.
Monsieur le Président, c'est inquiétant de penser qu'au lieu d'appuyer nos alliés dans la lutte aux terroristes, ici au Canada et à l'étranger, notre pays va se contenter de rester dans les estrades et seulement offrir de la formation. Est-ce que le ministre de la Défense peut nous dire pourquoi le Canada est un figurant dans la lutte au terrorisme au lieu d'être un leader?
Honourable Minister of Global Affairs.
Monsieur le Président, le Canada fera sa part pour lutter contre ce groupe terroriste. Il le fera de façon très efficace en centrant sur nos forces qui sont, par exemple, oui, la formation des forces militaires, la formation des forces policières, l'aide l'aide à la gouvernance, la construction d'institutions dans lesquelles les Irakiens pourront avoir confiance. Tout ça, le Canada le fera avec confiance, avec courage, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, 26 years after 14 women were murdered simply for being women, for daring to study engineering, violence against women remains unacceptably high. Working together, we in the NDP believe we can work together to end violence against women. But federal leadership is required. The new government promised a strategy on gender violence, including an immediate inquiry into the terrible issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Can the minister please tell us when her government plans to call this important inquiry?
For the Minister for the Status of Women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the member's excellent question. We are very excited to move forward on this file. Murdered and missing Indigenous women is a national tragedy that not only affects women, but their families and their communities. And so we intend to move forward incredibly quickly and with great deal of respect. We will do this by ensuring that we work with families and communities and national stakeholders to make sure we get it right the first time. Thank you.
Honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe, Bega.
Monsieur le Président, 26 ans après le drame de Polytechnique, trop de femmes sont encore victimes de violences parce qu'elles sont des femmes. Selon la Fédération des maisons d'hébergement pour femmes du Québec, 10 000 femmes ont été refusées l'année dernière seulement. Quand je travaillais dans une maison d'hébergement, j'ai dû moi-même refuser des femmes. Les femmes victimes de violences doivent avoir accès à ce service essentiel. La ministre peut-elle nous indiquer quand son gouvernement investira dans les maisons d'hébergement?
The Minister for the Status of Women.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that excellent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the excellent question. As the former executive director of a homeless shelter in Thunder Bay, I can tell you there's nothing more heartbreaking than being able to provide women a safe shelter. So it's my incredible honor to be able to work on this file and ensure that when women need a safe place to stay, barriers will be eliminated, and more than that, that we move forward to transitional housing that will eliminate the need for the cycle of sheltering. Thank you very much.
The member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The newly minted Minister of Trade continues to confuse Canadians with statements like, it's not her job to promote trade, and of course she's not ratifying TPP until the Americans do. This deal has been years in discussion, is now the gold standard on environmental and labour chapters. She claims to be pro-trade, so when will she stop stalling and sign this deal?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Our government supports free trade so strongly, I couldn't wait to answer that question. We understand how important it is for middle-class prosperity. We also understand on a deal this big, it is essential to consult Canadians and have a full parliamentary debate. But I must say to my honourable colleague that he is a little bit mistaken on the facts when he suggests we could be signing the deal now. The deal is not open at the moment yet for either signature or ratification, and he might want to have a coffee with the honourable member from Abbotsford, who is well versed in the details of how trade deals work.
Honorable député de Lévis-Lobinière.
Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement ferme les yeux devant les problèmes des agriculteurs. Dans le discours du trône, aucun paragraphe, aucune mention, aucun mot sur l'agriculture. Les libéraux ont banni les mots agriculteurs, agriculture, agricultrices, agroalimentaires de leur dictionnaire. Monsieur le Président, nos producteurs, sous gestion de l'offre, veulent savoir si l'entente sur les compensations de l'accord de partenariat transpacifique va être respectée. La ministre du Commerce international ne se dit pas liée par les compensations. La ministre peut-elle éclaircir sa position?
Minister of International Trade.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Notre gouvernement soutient le libre-échange et nous comprenons l'importance du commerce international pour la croissance de l'économie et pour la prospérité de la classe moyenne. À l'égard du PTP, nous nous engageons à faire preuve d'une transparence complète et à tenir un débat complet au Parlement. En fait, nous défendrons les intérêts des agriculteurs, j'ai dit le mot, canadiens, et avec mon collègue, le ministre de l'Agriculture, j'ai déjà rencontré les agriculteurs à ce sujet. C'est l'engagement que nous avons pris, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable Member for Grant Perry Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, the World Trade Organization ruled that the United States country of origin labeling was in fact blatantly protectionist. This is a rule that has cost our farm families over $3 billion on an annual basis. Now, our government was prepared to move expeditiously as soon as this ruling came out. Now, I wonder, you know, the invisible Minister of Agriculture has been invisible on this and other files. I'm wondering if he'll stand in this place, finally do his job, and defend the interests of farm families.
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the discriminatory coal legislation was in place for 8 years during the previous government's rule, and they did not. I welcome the ruling by the WTO, the fourth time the WTO has ruled in our favor with a record $1 billion quantum. We are pursuing this matter. I welcome the fact that the House of Representatives has repealed coal. We're calling on the Senate to do the same. Senator Pat Roberts has already today, Chairman of the Agriculture Committee, called for repeal of coal. And I would like to say to the honourable member who...
Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this morning the WTO sided with Canada for the third time on the matter of discriminatory U.S. coal legislation. The WTO arbitrator has found that the nullification and impairment under coal cost Canada about $1 billion a year and cost Mexico about $228 US annually. Now, will the minister tell us how this ruling will affect Canada's pork and beef products?
Bravo, bravo.
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
I thank the honourable member for Vancouver Centre for her question, and I am delighted to be back in the House with my cherished colleague. We welcome the WTO ruling. This is a vindication of the Canadian position. We are working very hard in Washington with the Senate, and we are very pleased Congress has already repealed this. And I do want to say to Canada's beef and pork producers, the Minister of Agriculture is a former farmer. I'm a daughter and granddaughter of ranchers. We are on the side of Canada's producers. We're in your corner, and if we have to retaliate, we will.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, this new government was not given a blank check, and Canadians expect due diligence. On June 2nd, when the Truth and Reconciliation Report was released, the current Prime Minister pledged his unwavering support for all 94 recommendations, the full list, no exceptions. Can the Minister of Indigenous Affairs give us the full cost of keeping this promise?
Honourable Minister of Indigenous Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou her question and for the work that we will get to do together on this really important file. We are so pleased to see that already that the provinces and territories have taken up those calls to action that are theirs, that the universities in this country have already committed to help with the things that are theirs, and that we will be able to do this. It was inappropriate for us to cherry pick out of the 94 recommendations, and with political will and leadership and partnership, nation to nation, we're going to get this done.
Honorable député de Jonquière.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Pendant la campagne électorale, les jeunes ont dit qu'ils tenaient à conserver le système de livraison postale à domicile. Dans ma région, 50 000 familles ont perdu leur système de livraison postale à domicile, dont 20 000 à Jonquière. Pendant que la ministre a renié ses engagements solennels, est-ce qu'elle peut au moins confirmer qu'il n'y a plus d'installation de boîtes postales communautaires partout au pays? Bravo.
Honourable Member, Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. Yes, we certainly can commit that there will not be any more roadside mailboxes installed. We put a stop to that, which meant that anyone who did have roadside mailboxes would get their door-to-door mail delivery resumed. So we are at a position, Mr. Speaker, where we have committed to home delivery. We are going to have a complete review of Canada Post, and they will determine the next steps.
The honourable member for Yukon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. It's an honour to stand in this place and again represent the people of the Yukon. Over the past several months, Canadians have made it clear that they not only want a new tone in leadership in Ottawa, but they also want a more accountable government. During the election, the Prime Minister made a commitment to implement a Prime Minister's question period. I now ask, Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister could please update this place on the status of this important promise.
Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians voted for change, and we're committed to delivering that change. We're committed to open, honest, transparent government. I have asked the Government House Leader to work with other parliamentarians to reform question period so that all ministers, including the Prime Minister, can be held to greater account. I know that the House Leader has already initiated discussions with other parliamentarians in the opposition, and I look forward to participating in Prime Minister's question period sometime in the future.
The honourable member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the past 15 years, 3 provinces have held referenda on electoral reform. In all 3, voters rejected the proposals, so it seems a bit undemocratic or even anti-democratic for the government to assert in the throne speech that 2015 will be the last federal election conducted under the first-past-the-post voting system. Wouldn't it make more sense for the government, once it has designed a new system, to follow the example of British Columbia, Ontario and Prince Edward Island and allow Canadians to vote directly for or against the proposed new electoral system?
The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. In this election, Canadians were clear that they are expecting us to deliver a change. This will be the last first-past-the-post federal election in our history, and we've committed to listening to Canadians, not just in British Columbia, but coast to coast to coast, and including them in a process and in the conversation that will change the history of this nation's democracy.
Député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Monsieur le Président, ma question s'adresse au Premier ministre. Nous avons vu dans le discours du trône de la semaine dernière que le gouvernement libéral affirme qu'il amorcera le travail avec les provinces et les territoires pour mettre en place un nouvel accord sur la santé. Lors des élections, le Premier ministre a fait parvenir une lettre à son vis-à-vis du Québec qui fait référence à l'entente sur la santé de 2004 où le Québec disposait d'un droit de retrait avec pleine compensation. Le premier ministre va-t-il répondre à la demande du Québec et établir à 6 % l'augmentation des transferts en santé, tout en respectant le droit de retrait avec pleine compensation pour le Québec?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to speak about the Canadian healthcare system, which has provided healthcare to Canadians now for well over half of a century in offering universal, publicly insured health care. It's something that Canadians hold dear. On the matter of the Canada Health Act, we sincerely uphold the Canada Health Act and its principles, including universality. I have already had the wonderful opportunity to be able to speak with my provincial and territorial counterparts, and we will be meeting together in January to discuss a new health accord, which will provide ongoing health care for Canadians in years to come.
Monsieur le Président, ma question s'adresse à la ministre de la Santé. L'Assemblée nationale du Québec s'est dotée d'une loi qui permet d'insérer l'aide médicale à mourir à l'intérieur du continuum des soins palliatifs, selon la stricte volonté d'une personne en phase terminale de vie. Le premier ministre a même louangé la loi québécoise. La ministre de la Santé peut-elle nous garantir que la demande de prolongation de 6 mois demandée par le gouvernement fédéral ne se fera pas au détriment de l'entrée en vigueur de la loi du Québec?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend for the question. The topic of physician-assisted dying is highly complex, sensitive, and we need to ensure that we have a discussion, a real discussion with Canadians that focuses on health care, that focuses on personal choice, and ensures that we protect the vulnerable. We are committed to ensuring and working with parliamentarians and asking this House to strike an all-party committee to examine this issue and proceed in a concerted way.
Honourable député de Manicouagan.
Monsieur le Président, le Premier ministre entend aller de l'avant avec la mise en place d'une nouvelle allocation canadienne aux enfants. Nous verrons les détails de cette mesure lors du prochain budget. En attendant, les parents sont toujours floués par l'imposition de la bonification de la prestation universelle pour la garde d'enfants, entrée en vigueur cet été, et l'abolition du crédit d'impôt pour enfants. Le premier ministre s'engage-t-il à rendre la prestation universelle pour la garde d'enfants non imposable pour l'année 2015, et cela, même s'il entend mettre en place une nouvelle allocation dans le prochain budget?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking the honourable member for her question. We intend on bringing forward a new Canada Child Benefit in the course of our budget 2016. We believe that this is the appropriate way to get at this issue, and will do so expeditiously in order to ensure that Canadian families can do better as they pursue their options for how they want to raise their children.
This will be the end of question period for today.